All right, time to sharpen those skills. In this explainer, we're running a rapid-fire boot camp drill to get you totally prepped for your directory service configuration exam. Let's jump right in.
We're going to hit 9 key questions across 3 really essential areas, covering everything from the absolute fundamentals all the way to modern cloud integration. Okay, let's get into our first section. We're talking about the absolute bedrock of any AD environment.
Take a second. How would you answer this one?
So a solid answer starts by defining ADDS as that central database, the phone book for the network, that manages access. And a domain controller, or DC, is simply the server running it. Then you've got to mention the 3 non-negotiable prerequisites you see here: a static IP, solid network connectivity, and a good descriptive server name. After that, you walk through the promotion process. First, you install the role, then you promote the server. Now, for the very first DC, this is key, you're creating a brand new forest. You'll also set the DSRM, that's the Directory Services Restore Mode password. Seriously, this is your break glass in case of emergency access, so do not lose it. After our final check, the server reboots, and just like that, your new domain is up and running.
Okay, imagine you're starting from scratch. How would you structure a whole new AD environment?
Well, the first huge decision you have to make is your forest design. As you can see, a single forest is way simpler and cheaper, which is why it's the standard recommendation for most places. You really only go with multiple forests when you have a super strict business or security reason to keep things completely separate, like after a messy company merger.
Now, when we talk about organizational units, or OUs, their whole purpose is delegation. You build them out so you can hand off control to specific teams over their own users and computers. And for naming, please just keep it consistent. Your DNS name, like Contoso.com, and that older NetBIOS name, Contoso, should match up to avoid headaches down the road.
Let's narrow our focus now to the 2 roles that are totally unique across the entire forest.
The 2 big forest-wide FSMO roles are the Schema Master, which basically controls the entire blueprint of your directory, and the Domain Naming Master, which handles adding or removing whole domains. Now, if that Schema Master fails, you are dead in the water. You can't make any changes to the directory structure, like say adding a new attribute to a user, until you get that role back online.
And to fix that kind of failure, you have to seize the role. The difference here is absolutely critical for the exam. Transferring a role is a planned, polite handoff. Seizing is a forceful, emergency takeover when the original server is gone for good. And here's the most important part. Once you seize a role, that original server can never ever be brought back online. It would cause total chaos.
All right, let's move into our next section and build on that. We're going to focus on the specialized jobs that keep AD humming along smoothly.
So we did the forest roles. Now think about the roles that operate inside each domain.
Within every single domain, you have 3 more of these roles. The RID master is responsible for handing out unique IDs. If it fails, boom, you can't create any new users, groups, or computers. The PDC emulator is the big boss for time sync and password changes. If it goes down, things get messy fast. And finally, the infrastructure master helps keep track of who's in what group when you have multiple domains.
So how does Active Directory make searches across a huge forest feel so fast?
The magic here is the global catalog server. Just think of it as the master index for the entire forest. It holds a partial copy of every single object, which makes searching super quick. But its most critical job? Handling logons. Without a global catalog available, a user from one domain simply can't be authenticated by a DC in another. It effectively breaks user access across the whole forest.
Okay, so how does AD keep all of its different copies perfectly synchronized? Well, AD has 2 flavors of replication. Inside a fast, well-connected location, what we call a site, replication is intra-site. Changes are sent uncompressed and almost instantly. But for replicating between sites, say over a slower network link, it uses inter-site replication. This is scheduled and the data is compressed to save bandwidth. And the best part? This whole thing is automatically managed by a process called the KCC, the Knowledge Consistency Checker, which figures out the smartest way to replicate everything.
All right, we're in the home stretch now. Let's get into our final section, focusing on day-to-day administration and how AD plugs into Azure.
So, how do you give people just enough permission to do their jobs without making everyone a domain admin?
This is where the delegation of Control Wizard becomes your absolute best friend. It's the perfect tool for applying the principle of least privilege.
You grant only the exact permissions needed, like resetting passwords to a specific group. And I mean a group. You should never delegate to individual users. This all fits nicely into a tiered admin model, where you protect your super powerful accounts by letting lower-tier accounts handle the daily grind.
Look, creating users one by one is slow, and you're bound to make mistakes. So let's see how we automate that with PowerShell. To make a new user, you use the new-add user PowerShell commandlet. And for creating users in bulk, you can just load all their info from a CSV file using import-csv and pipe it right into that command. The most important part here is the path, which needs the user's distinguished name, or DN. The DN is basically the full, unique mailing address for that object in Active Directory. It tells PowerShell exactly where to put the new account.
And for our final question, let's take Active Directory to the cloud. So you've got two main ways to do AD in the cloud. First, there's Azure AD, which is the modern cloud-native way to handle identity for web and SaaS apps. Then there's ADDS on an Azure VM, which is literally just your traditional Active Directory running on a virtual machine in Azure. You do that mostly for older legacy apps that still need things like Kerberos. A hybrid setup connects your on-premise AD to Azure AD, syncing up identities so your users get one seamless login for everything, both on-premise and in the cloud.
And that is our bootcamp drill. Remember, for the exam, and more importantly for the real world, the goal is to get past just knowing the how and to really truly understand the why behind all these critical architectural decisions. Good luck.